Shred Nation, today we talk about Lib Tech, Matt Bialos, a mad scientist, some of the best backside air style in the business, and one of my very favorite backpacks from DaKine that you will have a chance to win for yourself. Shred Nation, this episode might even melt your face clean off because you could be surfing this board in my hands by the end of the week. Shred Nation, if you have ever been snowboarding, then this man is largely responsible for the sensations that you felt as you slid across the snow. His name is Mike Olson, and he founded a company called Mervin Manufacturing in 1977, and that company is responsible for creating important snowboard brands like GNU and Lib Tech. I'm bringing this up because if you've ever seen any modern day snowboard, then you're seeing Mike Olson's influence on the world of snowboarding, because he's the guy who first thought it was a good idea to put side cuts into a snowboard, the shape that's responsible for the nose and the tail being so wide with the more narrow center. Now, even though his company is the longest running and only major manufacturer of snowboards left in the United States, what's not widely known is that Mervin Manufacturing, the company that Quiksilver bought in the 90s as a snowboard manufacturer, was originally founded with money earned from building surfboards in the 70s. So it's funny how life works. They're now making surfboards again in Sequim, Washington, which I might be mispronouncing, where holy shit, the waves look better than anything I've surfed this week. These boards that you see in surf shops now have been tested for the past 5 years in waves like this near Lib Tech's factory, where Mike and his team, after fusing together snowboards for over 30 years, were uniquely positioned to ask this question of, well, how do we just fuse a surfboard together instead of the industry standard of laminating and sanding? These boards have got a lot of attention this year because they look unique and you can step on them, your girlfriend can step on them, you can ride your bike over them and then back up your truck over them. But before you start going crazy, I introduce to you Exhibit A, Ryan Carlson, one of my very favorite underground surfers in California, who surfs these Lib Tech boards exclusively and has broken them in heavy surf before. And if my opinion matters at all, I can't recommend strongly enough that you care for a Lib Tech board with the exact same caution that you would use on a PU or epoxy board. Having said that, Brian Dickerson, a Shred Show amigo in San Francisco, wrote a very detailed review of this board, the Puddle Jumper, for Surfers Village. He said that after 35 years of surfing experience, he was surprised to find that he could stand on this board while changing in and out of his wetsuit to avoid hot asphalt on his feet, and then go surf it at Ocean Beach without that non-PU feel that some alternative construction methods have. Understanding why, though, is difficult because Lib Tech's construction methods for building these boards are secret and patented. I don't want someone stealing their methods. And even when they do talk about how these boards are built, they're using marketing terms like eco-isotropic thermopressure fusion system. So for the sake of brevity and because I'm just not an engineer, we'll focus on a few things that are easy to understand. When you pick up one of these boards in a surf shop, the first thing that you notice is it does not really feel like a ping pong ball. You see, a lot of times we look at the PU to epoxy spectrum as something like PU on one end and ping pong ball on the other, and you're trying to make epoxy boards that feel less like a ping pong ball and more like a PU board. This board feels excitingly PU when you touch it, and that might be because the resin used to fuse this board together is kind of epoxy, but not really epoxy. It's a new type of resin that hasn't been used in surfboards before, but I don't have the secret formula, and that's all that I can say. Beneath the resin that you're touching when you feel this board is this stuff, followed by this stuff. But the stuff that's most important to understand about this shape is the foam that is shaped into the shape that you see now, which I'm not allowed to show you pictures of, because that's a secret too. But the point is that while the materials wrapped around this shape, like hexylon fiber foam and magnesium, are challenging to understand, anyone can understand what it means when Lib Tech says that the nitrogen cell foam that this shape is made out of is greater than 99% closed cell. It means that water can't permeate into the foam if you get a ding. In fact, the only time that you would repair a ding on this board or do anything other than just keep surfing the board with a ding is when you have a ding somewhere on this board that would threaten the board's structural integrity. So for example, like a big ding on the rail. But since these rails are wrapped in this rubberized fiber that you see across all the rails, dings are pretty unlikely. Now in the end, it's only useful to understand this stuff because it can tell you things about what your surfing experience on this shape might be. I think that under normal surfing conditions, you would find this board a little bit harder to break in half, a lot less likely to ding, less reason to get sad if you do get a ding, and while you might find that the deck of this board gets heel and toe indentations into it roughly similar to a PU board, there is no central stringer in this shape. So you don't get those cracks along the stringer that happen when you have heel and ball of your foot dents or compressions in the deck. And this is where I want your help. Below in the comments, tell us how the Lib Tech boards that you're surfing are holding up and feeling as you ride waves when compared to the other PU and epoxy boards that you ride. In 2 weeks, I'll pick one of you at random to win a DaKine backpack that makes it easier for me to hike to the beach. The wet compartment holds all the neoprene you need for cold water, the cooler holds mini beverages for the hike back, and the side zipper makes everything in the dry compartment easy to get to with buckles and flaps to attach all sorts of other stuff to. This is the Jetty by DaKine, and I'll link more info on this pack down below. Now for those of you who wonder how Shred Show works like behind the scenes, between the time I just threw that backpack and the clip you're watching now, I just went and surfed for like an hour. Now if you look at this shape, you see that it's obviously different than the PU version of the puddle jumper that you see in surf shops. Most noticeably, it's got these wings right here. If we look at this clip, we can see clues about what those wings might mean for how this board surfs. When Ryan hits the lip, you can see the board release with lightning quickness. That type of release in the lip is often associated with wings like this because it creates a place on the bottom of the board for water to fly off. So right when Ryan gets to this point here, he cranks his back foot and he's using this point on the board as a pivot point to release the fins free before re-engaging his fins and riding away like a boss. This board also differs just slightly from the polyurethane puddle jumper in its width as well as in its thickness, but I wouldn't view that as any meaningful design change, just an attempt by Matt Biolos to switch up dimensions and make the shape more accessible for different skill levels and body types. The outline shows something that we're all very familiar with by now, these straight parallel rails running through the majority of the board. That creates a very wide surface for water to be flowing throughout the majority of the board, which would obviously make this board feel very speedy and like it has a lot of scoot moving forward beneath your feet. It's commonly said that as the rails on a surfboard get more parallel, that means more straight, that rails like that make a board slightly harder to maneuver, but wings like this will loosen up the shape of the board some beneath your feet. And if you compare this board to your standard shortboard, you would probably find that you're surfing this shape at about the same volume, just 5 to 8 inches shorter. So you could feel a lot of maneuverability come back into this board as a result of the short length that you would be taking away with a straighter rail. When I've surfed this, I haven't felt any stickiness at all. It feels like it just wants to whip around all over the place beneath my feet. If you look at the rocker in this shape, you can see that it's obviously very low throughout the entire board. You may find that if you measure the rocker in both the nose and the tail of this board, and then compare this board's rocker curve to other boards that you would surf at about the same dimensions, this board has about what you would expect in the tail rocker. It's very low, while the nose rocker might be just a little bit lower than what you would expect for more straight line speed. Single concave, lots and lots of single concave, very deep, slowly becoming a double concave, V coming out the back, little concave on either side of the V. Because of this deep single concave in this board, which I'll try to angle properly, this is the biggest challenge. Because of this deep single concave like this, you may feel like this board has a lot of get up and go, kind of like there's an engine beneath the board, like churning water like this beneath it. The flip side to that is if you're used to surfing boards that have more shallow concaves, so more close to just being flat on the bottom of the board, not concaved like this, then a board that has a very deep concave could feel to you as if it's harder to tip over onto a rail like this. It could feel like it's more gripping the water flatly like this on the water as you're moving forward. But with all this V back here in the tail, if you can notice that, that would mean that you'd likely feel an easy rail to rail action beneath your back foot, especially if you're a back foot oriented surfer. But Shred Nation, if you could just surf this board for yourself, you wouldn't need me to tell you any of this. And that's why I'm excited to give this board to Quivers in Huntington Beach so that any of you near Huntington can just surf it for yourself. Quivers will let you surf this board and many more, from Lost, Surf Prescriptions, Hayden Shapes, and more, for a monthly fee that lets you switch and swap boards as much as you want. I love this because it seems like there's two really interesting ways you could use this. First, you could be a member for just a month or two, surf all kinds of different boards, shapes, and dimensions, and then after about 8 weeks have a really good idea of the board that you want to buy next based on what you know you like surfing and don't like surfing. The other thought that interests me is I guess you could just never buy a surfboard ever again and treat Quivers as if it was your garage. Just go in surfing and swapping boards for the rest of your life. I'll link Quivers' address and all sorts of other info down below this video, and by the time this episode uploads, this board will already be there for their membership to surf. To wrap this up, I think that Lib Tech is writing a very exciting new chapter to the way that surfboards are manufactured. I think this board is probably mostly useful in waves that are knee to chest high, that have wide, slopey faces that are not barreling. But as you can see here, you can force it to work in waves that are a bit more burly as well. One last thing about fins, these boxes are made by Lib Tech. They're not Futures, they're not FCS, and they're compatible with either Lib Tech fins or FCS fins. The FCS fins that have 2 tabs on them, not FCS2. What's unique is you can actually place the fin in the box and move it backward or forward in the box, and that works in all 5 of the fin boxes. But to start out, I would really strongly recommend just placing the fin in the center of the box, perfectly lined up in the center of each box, because that's where Matt Biolos intended the fins to be placed when he designed this shape. After that point, depending on what you're into, you could move these fins forward and these fins backward to bring the fin cluster closer together, and that would probably lead to a little bit more pivot. If you want to get funky and experiment with something else, you could move the forward fins further up and the backward fins or single back fin further back, and that would widen out the fin cluster, which would probably lead to a more drivey sensation beneath your feet. Shred Nation, that is it for this episode. We'll see you very soon on Shred Show.